All right. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act webinar, and today is Thursday, August 19th. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Sarah Lane, and I am one of the facilitators of the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act, and we are really excited to share this presentation and save a lot of time at the end to answer your questions that you might have about the Act. And so I will kick us off and get us started. I would like to mention that there is a whole team supporting the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act. Me as the Farm to School and Early Childhood Education Program Coordinator. I'm also joined by Karen Reynolds, who is our Arkansas Ground and Arkansas Maize Manager. Mark Nelson, who is our Local Food Specialist, as well as our department leadership here at the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. We also partner with UAMS. They are our evaluation partner. So I am joined by Emily English today, Tom Vangi, and Willa as well. So all of us make up the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act team, and we will be rotating around throughout this webinar and giving different presentations. So the plan today is to first talk about the background of the Act. Then we will take a look back at last fiscal year and some of the takeaways that we realized. And then we will turn our focus towards this fiscal year, the changes that we've made to hopefully simplify the reporting process. And at the end, we'll have time for question and answer. So the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act was enacted in 2017 and then amended in 2019 with the purpose to strengthen and expand local farm and food economies in the state. And what it requires is institutions like K-12 schools, child care centers, state agencies, and others. It requires them to report annually on their food budget and to set a goal of spending 20% of their food budget on local food. Now, institutions, like I was saying, some examples, doesn't just include those that I listed, but it also includes our institutes of higher education, our state parks, child care facilities, and other entities like libraries, prisons, and skilled nursing centers. And when we talk about local food, we mean two different types of local food. First, local food that's grown within the state of Arkansas, and second, food that is packaged and processed within the state of Arkansas. Sometimes it can be both. And so now I am going to pass it in just a moment to Emily English, and her and I are going to go back and forth describing the background of the Act over the last few years.
Thanks, Sarah. So just a little context for where we've come from and how this all started. So the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act was enacted in 2017, like Sarah said, to really kind of create, strengthen, and expand our local farm and food economies throughout the state. And in its kind of original inception, it was written to require all state agencies who received more than $25,000 annually from the state for the purchase of food explicitly, to set a goal of procuring eventually 20% of their food from within the state. It required annual reporting to governor and legislators, and it was really overseen by the Bureau of Legislative Research. So in 2017 and 2018, it was the BLR who really reached out to potentially eligible entities and gathered that information.
Thanks, Emily. So then the background of 2019 and 2020, it expanded that definition of institution, like I mentioned, to include more than just state agencies. So that's where we're seeing our colleges, our universities, our K-12 schools, and more. And it also delineated the funding separate from the food service program. So the first kind of eligibility question is, does your institution receive state funding of at least $25,000 annually? That can be for staff, salaries, can be for services, operations, and also food, but very broadly, just receiving $25,000 from the state. The second eligibility question is operating a food service program. It also expanded the goal setting from 20% to at least 20% to allow institutions the ability to say maybe they want to procure more like 25% locally. It also shifted the management of the Act from the Bureau of Legislative Research to us at the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. And this is when we then joined forces and collaborated with UAMS.
As you can imagine, when the Act was amended in 2019, it really opened up who would be considered eligible for completing the full report. And so you can see here in the chart how many agencies and institutions were sent the survey link, and who we heard back from and who met that criteria. So in 2017, we sent out a link to about 130 agencies, 103 responded, and only 12 met that criteria. And in 2018, 146 agencies were identified, 55 responded, and only 8 met the criteria. So in 2019, when the Act was amended, really broadened that reach. And we distributed this kind of initial larger survey to 1,980 agencies who were identified as receiving some funding from the state. We weren't quite sure how many, so we decided to go ahead and cast that net really wide. Almost 500 institutions and agencies completed the report, and only 176 really met the criteria for actually completing and sharing all of the information about their food budgets. In 2020, we added a few more institutions and agencies that we thought might be receiving funding from the state, and so sent the link out to about 2,300 agencies. Heard from 673, and that who did complete those initial screening questions. And so we've been able to really learn a lot from all of this, and we're excited to have learned enough to narrow the field back down to those who we really think are actually eligible for this year. So we're excited to share with you some of that.
Thanks, Emily. And we also want to show you how the percentage spent has changed over the last 4 years that we've seen. So when the Bureau of Legislative Research was managing this Act, they found that 8% of the total food budget was spent on local food in 2017. They found 11% in 2018. And when the management shifted over to us in 2019, institutions reported spending on average about 15% of their food budget on local food. In 2020, we did find that the average went down to 12%. We believe that there are many factors going into this, one of them being COVID-19, another being better understanding on what is considered local and more efficient and correct reporting on local products. So we're really looking forward to seeing how the numbers look in 2021 in this upcoming year. And now we're going to take a look and show you what we compiled as our full report to the governor and legislative committees. So you can see how institution information is compiled together to create our one annual report. Just a quick overview. Again, last year we opened the reporting form in August. We were using an online survey form type called RedTap. We had created a website landing page, this eligibility infographic that you see on the slide, and a frequently asked questions document. We held a webinar very similar to this, which you can currently find that recording on our website, which will be replaced with this one after today. And we offered many one-on-one phone calls and technical assistance through our email inbox, lfsja@arkansas.gov. And then on December 28th, we submitted the annual report to the governor and legislative committees. And then you all, if you had reported last year, would have found in your inbox in February the full report, as well as it being on our website. And you can review all 4 years of the annual reports on our website. So now we're going to take a look specifically at what was reported last year.
Yeah, so here's a quick snapshot of kind of the full report and who responded. So we have a couple of initial screening questions that have stayed the same this year. And we had 673 respondents complete those 2 screening questions, one being about the amount of funds received from the state, and the other being about whether or not the institution has a food service program. Almost half of them did not meet the criteria for completing the report. So they either received less than $25,000 or didn't have a food service program, or both. But the other half did meet the criteria for completing the report. And of those, about almost 75% fully completed the report, which means that they were able to share their total food budget and their total local food budget. So how much of that budget was spent on local products. And then they also answered several other questions that are important to us being able to build a database of vendors and food products available in the state and to create technical assistance materials to support all of you. We had about 25% who only partially completed the report. So they were only able to provide a little bit of information about their food budget, total budget, or local budget. And you can see that most of our respondents who shared this information with us did come from a childcare setting. So they were either a K-12 school, an early childhood education facility, some other programs who are targeted in this LFFJA are after school programs, senior programs, prison system. And so we've gotten some good information from those institutions as well.
And looking at the total food budget that institutions listed, there's quite a range, as Emily was mentioning. This act is not just looking at state agencies, right? We have child care centers, we have state parks, we just have a range of institutions. And so some have very small total food budgets and others have $1 million total food budgets. So the median, as you can see on the graph here, is kind of right in the middle of 100,000 to 500,000 as the budget. And so that was more or less the breakdown. And then also we were looking specifically at how those food service programs were operated. And 3/4 of them are operated by the institution themselves. The other 25% by a food service management company like Airmark, Opa Foods, Chartwells, and others.
So you can see here too the range in local food that's being spent. As reported last year, 267 agencies reported the amount of money they've been using to purchase local farm and food products, and those responses ranged from $0 to over $2 million annually, with that kind of middle amount of the range falling around $20,000. You can also see, as we said, we're collecting information on the vendors where institutions are purchasing these local products. And these 5 over here on the right were the most commonly reported vendors that we saw in the data. And we're also gathering information about preferences from institutions about what types of foods they'd like to purchase, and then also how they'd like to purchase it. So we see fruits and vegetables really topping the list on preferred products, and that ideally organizations would receive those through their wholesale distributors, probably through those they already have relationships with, or directly from farmers and growers in the area.
We also ask questions on the motivations and barriers and opportunities that institutions have when they want to purchase local. Top 2 motivators are meeting the requirements of this act. So like we've stated, the requirement is that every year these institutions that receive at least $25,000 from the state and operate a food service program are required to report to us annually. It's then recommended to create a policy statement and be procuring up to 20% or more on local foods. Also, institutions recognize that a motivator behind buying more local foods is higher quality products. A couple of the big barriers are lack of supply to meet the needs. These are, like we've said, multi-million-dollar budgets to very small budgets. And so looking at the supply ability of our state in Arkansas to meet the need of the 20%. And another barrier is not knowing where to purchase from. And there are definite opportunities around improving kitchen and procurement infrastructure to allow better processing of local products and breaking that down, and also building those local food relationships with farmers and with distributors.
So we also generate several appendices that are added to the report. You can see here on the far left-hand column, we do report by agency, those who submit and complete a full report. those who partially complete the report, and then those who did not complete the report. So again, partial completion is filling out the screening questions, answering some of the questions either about your food budget, local or total, as well as maybe some other questions. But a full report, like fully completing the report, includes sharing both your total food budget and your local food budget, even if that dollar amount is zero. So these are the most important questions. And this is really what we're trying to get to in terms of full completion for these reports. You can also see that we're generating lists of vendors where you can find and purchase these products, and then also a list of those food and farm products, and trying to really create a robust database that both serves you all as institutions when you're looking for local products, and also helps us know which vendors to support and how to help promote the products and the vendors who are offering local.
So that was a look back at fiscal year 2020, and we are going to now turn towards 2021 and share some of the changes and adjustments that we have made to make this reporting process easier for all of you institutions. So you will have noticed that the reporting form launched on August 2nd, a few days before it had the year prior, and it will close on October 1st, 2021. That is mandated in the bill and the act. Instead of using REDCap, which was the survey type that we used last year, we are now using a different one called Cognito. And we have been able to update the survey, reduce the number of questions, and simplify the way that you're reporting information to us. In just a moment, our evaluative team at UAMS is going to go through the reporting form and model how one would fill one out. We have also created resources and updated resources. So our website landing page houses all of these, and we will do a demonstration of that, as well as we created a local food act infographic. We will go over that. We have updated the frequently asked questions document, and new this year, we created a social media and promotion toolkit to help all of you, promote and share out this if you would like to with your constituents. And as we did last year, we're here to provide technical assistance through our webinar, like today, one-on-one phone calls, and through our LFSJA help email address. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pass it over to UAMS, and they're going to walk through our reporting form.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Tanbangi and I are going to attempt to complete a report here on this webinar. And while she is kind of filling in some of the information, I'm just going to walk us through the sections. And feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat as they come up so that you don't forget them. We will definitely have time for question and answer at the end. So this is what you'll see when you click on the link. And really the top part is an introduction to the report. And also, you'll see multiple times the email address. If you have questions, we've got support kind of on hand to answer your questions as they come up. So just click on that email address anytime you need it. Again, reminds you that the deadline is on October the 1st at 11:59 p.m. And that there are lots of resources, and a recording of this webinar will be available on the Arkansas Department of Agriculture's website. Okay, so the first section, section A, is institution information. So this is where we need to know who you are. So first question is your full institution name. And the most important tip here is to please enter it as completely as possible, no abbreviations. Type it in exactly the way you would submit tax forms, exactly the way you think it is, documented in the state's history and reporting databases. And I know if you've been doing this a few years, you know that we've been trying to figure out the best way to connect the name of an institution and what it may go by colloquially within your community and what it's listed as with the state. And so we are asking this year that everyone provide their EIN number. And this is a federal identifier, and you can, if you don't know it, you can call. We list the number right there for you to call and track that number down. Tonbangi is showing you how to enter the number into the system here, and we prompt you to do that. If it's not done correctly, you'll get another error message that says, wait, you forgot a digit, or wait, make sure you hyphenate it where you need to. So put your EIN number in there. And that should really help us have a lot cleaner data set this year. So the next question is what type of institution? And these are really broken down pretty simply. And it's either an institution of higher education, college and university. We're using these brackets and parentheses to kind of help you know who we're talking about when we say these things. A child care facility, which includes K-12, public and private, early childhood education facilities, so if you're serving kind of the younger than 5, and then also alternative learning environments. And you'll see if you click on a child care facility, there's another drop down below that so that you can further tell us if you're K-12, early childhood, or alternative learning. That helps us know who's managing your food service kind of standards and regulations. So tell us that, and then tell us your mailing address. Tell us all of your contact information. It's your address, your city, your state. Sometimes we have several institutions in the state with the same name. And so it's very helpful if we know where you're located so that we can make sure we don't accidentally delete one if it's, if there are actually only one. So, and then we want to know contact information, name, first name and last name. And it'll start to pre-populate here. So you can see it adds your person's contact name. We want to know their title, their email address, and then their phone number. And the email address is really important because it's this is kind of the email address that will be associated with your save option. So, and we'll demonstrate how to save the form later, but this is really the email address that connects this form back to you. So if it's wrong, then you would never get the email with the link to come back to this. So you want to make sure it's entered in correctly. These are also all required questions, so you won't be able to move forward until you've answered all of them. The next section are the screening questions we talked about kind of in the background section. So again, how much money did you receive from the state? And you'll click on that. So we first want to know if you meet that criteria. And then if you do meet that criteria, then we ask you about a food service program. If you answer yes to both of these, you'll move on. If you answer no to either one, then you're prompted to go ahead and hit submit. And that's great. You've completed the report and we're happy to know that you're not eligible. Yep, move on. Okay, so the rest of the report is really kind of the meat or the fruit and veggies of since fruit and veggies should make up half of your plate. It's really where we get into all the good stuff about what you've been purchasing and your food budget. So the first thing we want to know is whether or not your food service program is managed by you, your organization. Is it self-operated? Do you kind of manage all of the ins and outs of those meal preparations, purchasing, or is that something you've contracted out? Is it managed by a food service management company? If you are managed by a food service management company, we ask you to tell us who that is. So we want to know the name of the company. We want to know who your contact is, their title is, their email, and their phone number. Yep. That's really important too for us so that we know which organizations out there are supporting our food service in the state and how we can support them to help them procure more local products. And then we also recognize that several institutions serve at multiple feeding sites. And so this is helpful for us to know how many cafeterias or how many different facilities are you serving meals through. And then finally, we want to know what the total food budget is for all of your feeding sites. So your organization and institution is responsible for feeding X number of people, and this is your total food budget that you allot to meet this food service program. And then you go on to the next section. Next, we're going to start to ask you about local farm and food products. So did you purchase anything local? Yes or no. It's totally fine if you did not. We just would like to know. So you would just say no. But if you did, hopefully you did. then we'll ask you for some information about that. So, and this is where we've really tried hard to clean it up and to make it easier. So again, if you've been through this for the last couple of years, this should be a much more pleasant experience for you. We welcome your feedback on the process though. So first things first, we want to know where you're getting your local products. So we have taken that whole list of vendors who've been reported to us over the last couple of years and inputted them into the system already. So they're pre-populated. So you have the option to search for your vendor. And then if you find it, great. And then we've pre-populated it with an address that we think may be the right one. It's possible that it's not, and that's also okay. So if it's not the right address, you can say, yes, I have a different address. I work with a different, vendor. My vendor has a different address. And then we ask you to share that with us so that we can, again, start to streamline this process and learn more information through this report. So you would enter the vendor address you have associated with your vendor. And then we want to know who your contact is. So who is your contact at Highland Dairy? What's their email address and their phone number?
So now you're going to say what food product you purchased from the vendor. So the vendor we had selected was Highland Dairy, so dairy products. So I could list milk and then specifically how much funding we spent in the last fiscal year buying milk from Highland Dairy. Perhaps we also bought, yogurt or something else from Highland Dairy. I can hit the add local farm and food products and add the second product in there, or third or fourth, and the second cost as well. You'll notice that now it's going to total up everything and all the funding that I spent with Highland Dairy. Now, I might have bought local from another vendor, so I'm going to click the add vendor option. Again, I can go through the list. This time though, I notice that my vendor is not listed. So I can click the a vendor not listed and enter my new vendor's name. So here, Tambangi is showing us entering in a new vendor's name, address with that as well. So we have all the information. Again, this is so that in the future, we're creating better lists for all of you institutions who are trying to buy local and meet the requirements of this act. So as specific as you're able to with both address and contact information, that's going to help us create this database and list. So you'll be adding in the address, contact information, email, and phone number of the vendor that wasn't listed. Then it looks the exact same as it did with Highland Dairy. You are going to get to say what food products you bought. So let's say in this case, we were buying kind of a mixed box of fruit and vegetables that were locally grown in the state. And this is called community supported agriculture. Sometimes you'll be able to buy these boxes directly from a farm. Sometimes even at grocery stores, they have these local food boxes. And so in this example, we got 6 boxes last fiscal year, 1 per month, and they were $30 each. We're giving a lot of specificity so we understand. And then in the total amount spent, it's just the dollar amount. So that way it'll calculate up correctly, and it will all come together compared to my total food budget. You can also see that we also bought from this farm strawberries in addition to getting our once a month CSA box. So you can see the total cost from Emily's Dream Farm is that $1,600 or so dollars. Remember that we also had the funding from Highland Dairy above, so that $54,000. So when you now look at the bottom, you are going to say, wow, I spent $55,000 total. We are combining both the Emily Dream Farm and Highland Dairy. If that is correct, then I would say yes. If something is not correct about that, and I realize that maybe I had entered an extra 0 and the number is way too big, or maybe it's way too small, this is where it's going to prompt you to go back and review and edit your report. So it looks great to me. That's what I remember spending this last fiscal year. So I'll move on to the next screen. So on this top page, you will see a summary of everything that I just listed on the last 2 pages. First, it's going to show me my total food budget across all my feeding sites, which was $500,000. Then specifically how much I spent on local food at those 2 vendors. And it will calculate for me what my percentage spent on local food was. So that summary here is just for you to be able to see everything and confirm that your numbers are correct.
So we did want to pause here and talk really quickly through the save option. So we know that sometimes institutions work with vendors and they purchase quite a few items, and it's hard for the institution to know what was local, what wasn't, what exactly did I buy, what was the cost. And so we encourage you all to work with your vendors and your distributors. And it's also possible to save, get that information, bring it back, fill this out, or to save and share this link with your vendor and ask them to help you fill it out. So if you hit the save button, provides you that link, you can copy it, send it an email to somebody, whoever you want help with to share this. And then when you're ready, you can come back to the link and it will bring you right back to where you were. So it will have saved all of your information that you've already put in there, and it will allow you to then go right to where you left off and start to finish completing that information. So it's really important, again, to make sure the email address is correct and that you have that link. So if you accidentally close your survey without copying that link or having it emailed to yourself, you will lose what you've done. So we recommend saving, copying the link, sending it to yourself in an email when you're, even right away, like right when you've just entered your own kind of personal information. Just so if you do need to pause or it actually gets to close, that you've got a link and you can come back into it. So this is a good spot to do that. Yep. So like Sarah was saying, this really shows you clearly what you've entered as your total food budget, what you've entered, as your local food budget, as added up by the products and the costs, the prices that you've put in, and tells you what your percentage is. So that's great. Now you know how much you've spent, auto calculates it for you, shares it with you. Write it down, share it. It's like, that's a really exciting thing for you to map your progress. And then again, as we've said multiple times, we really want and are trying hard to figure out how best to support you all in this process. And so we want to know what's helped you procure local products in fiscal year, 2021. So tell us who helped you. Was there information? Were there databases? Are there resources that you've been using? Even if it was just relational, that you met some farmers or you had a conversation with your distributor. We want to know these things so that we can lift them up and share them out with others, and we continue to really build on these kind of success stories. And then we want to know if your institution set a goal for this year. So did you set a procurement goal internally? Maybe you decided you were going to meet a certain percentage. Maybe you decided it was going to be $1 amount, or maybe it was something else. Maybe you wanted to build a garden and try and grow some of your own food. Maybe you wanted to try and increase some access for staff or your community there at your institution. We want to know how you're relating to and supporting your institution to get more local food into the environment. We'll ask you to share some specifics about that related to percentage or dollar amount. And then if you're a school, the Department of Agriculture is really interested in knowing if you are interested in being a part of a pilot program where potentially we would be able to provide a 10-cent reimbursement per meal to support local products. So just kind of in the early stages of learning if there's interest and if that were available, if you would be willing to apply. So those two questions are just for schools. Okay, and then if you remember, as part of the act, we are required to ask about your institution's commitment. The bill really sets forth the intent that all institutions should make a commitment to meeting this goal over time. And so, and the way that we've been collecting that is to have a signed kind of letter of commitment from your institution, the head of your institution. And it can be a simple letter. We've provided a template here that's just a click, download, you fill out, put your organization's logo on, and then we keep that on file to demonstrate your. This is also something we share in the report. And then finally, some of the the other information that we want to know, this is the stuff where it will really help inform how we're supporting you all and also your vendors to get more local products into the system. And so we want to know from you, what's the easiest way? What are you most interested in buying, and how are you interested in buying it? So again, tell us if you prefer to buy it directly from a grower, if you want to buy it from a distributor, or if all of these are important to you, then click them all. We want to know about gardening on site, and we want to know, again, like the food products you're interested in: fruits and vegetables, meat, fish, dairy, grains, non-dairy beverages. These are all really important for us as we build out a program to support this policy. And then in that vein, this helps us understand the motivations and barriers that you're facing. So what are the things that really are helpful for you, that facilitate this process for you? What motivates you to meet these goals? And we're asking you about them individually. Maybe some are not that important. And that's good for us to know too. So be honest and answer all of those if you can. And then also tell us about the things that make it really hard for you to purchase. So are you missing some vital information or some vital partnerships or relationships? Is it about costs? Is it about support from the administration? Those are also really important as we try to literally break down some barriers and make this easier for you. And then finally, we want to know how COVID is impacting your work. So has COVID impacted your food service program in the last year? Tell us a little bit about that. And then we also want to know if it's impacting your ability to procure local food. So the first one's more general. Is this messing up your participation rate in meal programs? Is it messing up your supply chain? How have you had to change, or maybe not, what you're able to offer? And then specifically, how does that impact your ability to meet these local procurement goals? And once you've answered all those questions, then you hit submit and you're done. And there is now a PDF available for you to download to keep for your records. So we know that's also very important for record keeping, and also helpful as you go back and revisit how the progress has gone for you over years. So it should have all of your answers there, and you can save that to your computer.
Great demonstration. Thank you, UAMS, for all your help on this. And we are now just going to briefly show you some of the resources that we have available, and then we will open up for question and answer. So my colleague Karen and I are going to talk about what we have available for you. First off, you can go to the Arkansas Department of Agriculture's website under Programs, Local Food Farms and Jobs Act. You can find all this information that we're about to show you on resources. You can also refine the reporting forum link, and the previous reports, and the recording of this webinar will be there. So first, I'm going to pass it to Karen to talk about the infographic that we have created to help you understand your eligibility and local food.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. As we are all aware, that is a lot of information to cover. There's a lot of details and a lot of data that we're asking you to share with us. So we developed an infographic to streamline this and simplify it for you. It's based on a lot of the questions that we got repeatedly. The infographic describes the act and the amendment, and it describes two of the definitions that we had the most questions about: the institution and what exactly is local food. Then we got a lot of questions on whether or not my institution is eligible. So we developed the questions very simply. If you receive this amount of money, yes, this is where you go next. No, then you're not required to report. Then do you have a food service program? The next step, yes. Then we put the timeline for the most important dates at the bottom, so you can see when it opened, with today's webinar, and then when it closes. And as Emily mentioned before, the local food covers the whole plate. So I put together a graphic so you can see if it's dairy, it could be meat, it's produce, vegetables, and fruit, as well as grains. And so then it asks, where do you buy your food? Do you buy it from a farmer or a farmer's market? If yes or no, it tells you where to go with there. Or do you buy from Aramark or another distributor of food hub or grocery store commercially. Then it asks, is that food identified as being Arkansas grown or Arkansas made? And then it has yes, no, and takes you to the next step. If you do not buy from a farmer's market, do not report this as local food. If you do, then you can report it as local food. And then if the distributor identifies it as local food, yes, it is local food. If not, you can see that you do not report it as local food. So hopefully this will simplify the process for you, give you a quick reference, maybe cheat sheet, if you want to call it that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karen, for going over the infographic. The second resource we have is our frequently asked questions document, which you see here. Again, at the top, it is a very similar information that you'll receive either in your launch email or seen at the top of the reporting form, with those handy links as to where to get back to the reporting form. We define some key terms and phrases like institution, local farm and food products. We want to make sure that this is really clear for you as you're filling this out. We also get into some specifics as to what does a food product mean? Does it mean things like liquids or not? What is a food service program? What is my food budget? And then it goes into a lot of questions that we have received over the last 2 reporting years and ones that we anticipate might be on your mind. So it kind of starts out more generally and then into the specifics of the report. So you'll see here, do I need to submit it? We're answering that question for you and also relinking into the reporting form. And we also, what if you don't submit a report? If you don't submit a report in this year, when we sent out all of the emails to the institutions, we only sent emails to ones that we think will meet the requirements of this bill. That was a shift from last year and the year prior, when we had just kind of opened this up and sent it to everyone who received state funding. This year, we really identified which are the groups of institutions that receive both state funding and operate a food service program. So if you received an email from us, we highly encourage you to complete at least the first 2 screening questions, or email us if you believe that you don't meet the requirements. Otherwise, you'd be listed as did not respond on our annual report to the governor. There are a lot more questions that the FAQ goes through, and I will let you peruse those on your own time. And lastly, we made a social media and promotion toolkit. I'm going to pass it back to Karen to share about that.
Thank you, Sarah. We found that our partners assist us in promoting this reporting and help us collect the data, and we appreciate that. So we put together a toolkit to help you help us. So the toolkit includes language that we use, therefore you are sharing the exact same consistent message as what we have. And it's sort of newsletters and listservs that you can share with your group. And then we have language for social media so that you can post on your social media, as well as we have graphics that you can download and just make it very easy for you to streamline this to help us. We appreciate your help.
So you've now seen the reporting form, you've now seen the resources that we have available to help you in this. Let's just finally talk about technical assistance and how moving forward we can answer any questions that you might have. So as your questions arise, we highly encourage you to email lfsjahelp@arkansas.gov. Our local food specialist, Mark Nelson, who's on this call, is managing that email inbox and responding to people daily to answer questions. You can also call the Arkansas Department of Agriculture, that is our phone number, and ask to speak with someone about the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act. Another great place to check is to rewatch this webinar. Check out the frequently asked questions, and those might really be able to answer your question before reaching out to us, but we are here to help you. So to review, this has been a webinar full of information about what the Local Food Farms and Jobs Act is, what happened last fiscal year, and what we are doing this fiscal year with reporting. Again, the reporting form is open until October 1st, 2021. Use our resources and reach out to us if we can help you in this process. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and we are going to open it up to all of you. What are your questions that you came prepared with? You can feel free to type them in the chat or feel free to unmute at this time. Our skilled, I think the first one I see is from Carrie, our skilled nursing facilities eligible. We participate in Medicaid and that's where the state funding is coming from. Yes, you are correct. So over the last year, we've really better understood state funding. And so we have worked with our partners at the Department of Human Services in this case, and they provided a list of those that receive Medicaid funding. So yes, if you receive Medicaid funding, you are receiving at least $25,000 from the state. And if you operate a food service program, yes, you're eligible and required to complete the reporting. Jill, if we buy milk from Walmart, but it is Highland milk, do we list that under Highland? Great question. Emily, I might move that question to you to see how we might.
My thoughts on this, and Tom Bongi, you may have another, is that the place where you're buying your product, who's selling the product to you is your vendor. So in this case, that's Walmart. The product you're purchasing from your vendor is the food product, and you know that Highland Dairy is local Arkansas milk. And so I would list Walmart as the vendor, and then you're welcome to put in their address, where you bought it from, and then tell us that you bought Highland Dairy milk and how much you think you spent last year on it. Looks like I'm getting nods. So
yeah, that would be my thought as well.
Okay.
Great answer.
Yes, great question, Charlotte, coming in with that. We are trying to really help institutions realize what is local in the state. So yes, at this time, Bimbo Bakery in this case, in your example, yes, is one that we are considering a local vendor. Just so you all are aware, this upcoming year, we will be following up more specifically with distributors and vendors to confirm these pieces. But we don't ask that of you, of the institutions. You are already doing a lot of work to provide this information to us. So anything that is listed in the dropdown, we are classifying as local this year. Again, we might not have everything on there, especially if you've purchased from another Arkansas grown farm or a farmer's market. So add another vendor if it's not listed. But yes, anything listed in the dropdown, we are classifying as local.
And it is, as Sarah said, our goal with this is to do a deeper dive into what is available. And so some of, we have gotten lots of questions over the years about Highland Dairy, or Tyson chicken nuggets, knowing, that some of this is maybe processed in a facility outside of the state, but it's headquartered here. And so right now, we are trying really hard to not put the burden on you all to figure this out, but to instead take that on ourselves. So right now, like Sarah said, if it's in the drop-down menu, you're welcome to use it and report it. As we potentially develop, parameters that may narrow that field, we'll be sure and let you know. So just know that we're trying to figure it all out. But as you know, the food system is very complicated. And so connecting those dots and tracing those lines, it takes some time. You all telling us though what you think and what you feel like is local is very helpful. And so, again, providing as much specificity in your food products and your vendor name as possible will really help us create a robust database that's searchable and easy to access, that we hope to roll out, in the next year or so.
Sarah, did you say I can unmute and ask a question?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is Lori Carter, and I work for DYS. And I received this form, but I'm not thinking it applies to me because I don't get any money from the state. I'm the state. So, but we contract our juvenile facilities out. Should they be the one that's filling out these forms?
Hey, Lori, great that you're on here. Great question. I did include you just because we've worked together in the past. I wanted you to be aware of these pieces.
Okay.
And it's really up to you how you want to report. If, for example, you want to compile all the information into one report and submit that for all of them, you're welcome to do that. We see that in the case, like the Arkansas Department of Corrections does this often with the prison system, where they'll just compile them all into one report. Or for example, all the human development centers compile all of them into one report. So I will let you make that decision on if it's better for them to be completing separate reports, or if you all would prefer to submit one report to us.
Okay, I'll get with the kitchen managers from all the sites and see if we can all get together and do it together, because I really don't know who they purchased from.
Well, hey,
So,
and that we appreciate your support in this and coordination on that. So thank you for this great question.
okay, thank you.
So, yeah, so Bobby, I would encourage you to reach out to your Cisco contact and ask them to help you create the list of products you've purchased from them that are local. So we've been working with them too, and all of our distributors are working really hard to be able to more easily provide their institutional buyers with a list of what you've purchased that's local. So I would say reach out to Bobby. Not to Bobby, sorry, reach out to Cisco and ask them to help you complete that part of the form.
And on that note, you do not need to separate the food products line by line. Like we said, if Cisco's giving you milk, for example, and it's all coming from Highland Dairy, you can compile your total purchase with Highland Dairy into one and say dairy products, for example, in this case, or Tyson Foods. So yes, we recommend that if you don't know, you can go back to the infographic that Karen went over. If you're not sure if something's local and you're buying from a distributor, go to your distributor and say, hey, what vendors what have you provided to me that's local? And they can help you fill out this report. Judith, I'm reading your question. I can look that up for you. If you'll send me a private message with your email address and institution name, I can look that up. And if there's a previous report, we can get that to you. And another question that I received is just clarifying again, is Medicaid funding considered state funding? Yes, it is considered state funding. And when we mean a food service program, we mean, you could be feeding kids, you could be feeding adults, both. As long as you are providing food to people regularly, that's a food service program.
And I would say, even if it's a seasonal program, food service program means that at some point in the year, other than just like a one-off catering event, that you, for a period of time, are consistently serving and offering meals to your clients or your target audience.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We will create a recording and send this out. And if you have any final questions, we'll stick on for a minute or two more. But for the rest of you, it was great to see you on here, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everyone.